Police said that after a night of drinking, he wandered to the Port of Albany, fell into the Hudson, and drowned. There are some new developments which could lead to murder charges.
Who disappeared after a night out with friends downtown. The ME says he accidentally drowned. Body was found in the Ohio River near Neville Island back in March, ending a 6-week search.
The FBI now involved in the desperate search for a missing 21-year-old college student from Pennsylvania.
I don't know where I am. I'm so cold. Please help me. I'm lost.
Those are the first words Dakota James said when he called his friend Shelley on the evening of December 15th, 2016. Terrified, Shelley got in her car and headed towards where James said he would be. It was late at this point, and it was another cold night in the city of Pittsburgh. As she headed in the direction of North Pittsburgh, where James claimed to be, Shelley checked his location on her phone and realized that he was nowhere near there. James was actually in South Pittsburgh. James was clearly not in the right headspace as he continued to plead with Shelley to find him. He kept saying that he was cold and scared, and that he had no idea how he even ended up alone, walking in the middle of the street. Shelley would get to his location in 10 minutes, only to find James stumbling out of a hotel and heading in the direction of a black SUV. The SUV was facing the wrong way in the wrong lane. As James walked closer to the vehicle, Shelley pulled up and screamed his name. He stopped in his tracks and turned to her. He walked to her car and got in as the SUV sped off into the night. James was confused, crying, and overwhelmed with everything that was going on. He said that he had gone out to the bars at 7:15 p.m. with some coworkers, but remembered nothing after that. His words were clear, and Shelley noticed that when he walked to the car, he walked in a straight line. He had blanked for 4 hours, but it was clear to Shelley that he was not drunk. Rather, it appeared that Dakota James had been drugged. Relieved to be in the car and safe, James didn't wish to talk about the situation anymore, and the conversation with Shelley was over. 5 weeks later, Dakota James would disappear after a similar night of bar hopping with the same coworkers. It would be 40 days before his body was found in the Ohio River. In his bloodstream was GHB, also known as the date rape drug. His body seemed to be in a good condition, despite it being found in the water. Marks were also found on his neck that seemed consistent with strangulation. Officials later determined that James's death was an accidental drowning, and that he had simply fallen off the Roberto Clement Bridge on his way home from the bar. 11 smiley faces had been graffitied onto that very bridge. It's clear why this conclusion rubbed many the wrong way. From the drugs in his system to the previous story told by Shelley, things definitely seemed sketchy, but as it turns out, there was even more evidence to suggest that an accidental drowning could not have been possible. For starters, a transaction was made on his credit card that was supposedly found on his body. The transaction was made 2 days after he had disappeared and supposedly fallen into the water. Also, as I mentioned before, his body was in pristine condition, which would not have been possible if he had really been in the water for 40 days. This shocking case seems to many like a clear-cut murder, and many view this as a rare mistake by officials. But the truth is that this case is similar to hundreds of others. All across the United States, cases that appeared to be clear-cut murders have been dismissed and blamed on accidental drownings by authorities. 2 retired New York detectives by the name of Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte discovered this disturbing trend many years ago. And it is worth noting that together they have more than 40 years experience, and they were extremely well-respected detectives throughout their career. Together, they have theorized that all of these strange accidental drownings may be connected. In many of these questionable cases, the victims are almost always males, they are always white, they're college-aged, athletic, intelligent, and popular. They disappear from bars or parties, and typically the victim acts drunk despite only having a few drinks or none at all. Many show evidence of drugging, with at least 30 testing positive for GHB. All were found dead in a body of water days, weeks, or months later. Most had injuries that were not consistent with drowning, and their bodies were found in conditions unnatural for drowning victims. And all were found with graffiti smiley faces at the location that they would have entered the water or where their body was found. Detective Kevin Gannon first recognized this trend in 1997, when on April 7th, 21-year-old Patrick McNeil was found off of a pier in the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn, New York. Marks were found on his neck, along with charring on his hands and torso. His body position in the water was labeled as being unnatural for a typical drowning. Weeks before, McNeil was seen leaving a bar appearing to be heavily intoxicated. As he began to walk out of view of the bar, some patrons noticed a car driving slowly behind him, but no one paid it too much attention. Despite the obvious signs of foul play, this case was quickly labeled as yet another accidental drowning spurred by excessive drinking. And since this case, it's estimated that potentially 300 other cases like this have been reported across the United States, which shows just how severe this disturbing trend is. Cases have appeared in over 25 separate cities, mainly on the East Coast, and they typically appear in clusters in a close period of time. But what does all this actually mean? How could such a wide range of deaths be occurring in such similar circumstances? And if these college students aren't actually dying due to drowning, then what is killing them? As mentioned before, Kevin Gannon was the one who recognized this trend, and he's also the one who proposed this theory. Gannon believes that these victims were being drugged when they would go out and visit a bar or stop at a party. They would then leave the bar drugged, unaware of what was going on, which to onlookers, the victims would likely just appear intoxicated, so it really wouldn't raise many red flags. Once outside of the bar, they would then be abducted and thrown into a car, and then held for a period of time, potentially be tortured, before they were killed and dumped into a nearby body of water. But one serial killer being responsible for so many potential murders seems nearly impossible. So Gannon suggests that potentially this is a group of serial killers. A lot of these deaths occur in major cities, and it is believed that groups of these killers have cells in all these cities. Having such a spread out and vast organization would make it much easier for these murderers to get away with their crimes, because they can spread out the murders and make it seem natural to authorities. And committing murders in multiple jurisdictions makes it extremely difficult for police and investigators to really do anything about it. Also, the fact that smiley face graffiti has been found at nearly all of these crime scenes is another point that Gannon states favors his theory. It is believed that these smiley faces are the mark of the killers, and it is potentially done so that the organization can mark their crime scenes. This is a common trait among serial killers, so the idea that this graffiti is being used as kind of a tag for their murders seems somewhat likely. And truthfully, looking at this theory as a whole, it does seem somewhat possible. But if this is truly the case, then why haven't the police caught on yet? This could be for a few reasons. Either they are fully convinced that there is nothing going on here, or they're covering something up. And truthfully, it would make a lot of sense for them to want to keep this on the down low. If police had admitted that a large group of murderers had been killing people for this many years, it would be a very bad look for them. I mean, admitting that this group is out there or even entertaining the idea would practically equate to them admitting that they got hundreds of cases wrong in the past. And along with this, if officials began to investigate these alleged murders now, a panic would surely ensue as people would begin to believe that serial killers are executing people all across the United States. So there is a logical reason why the police and other authorities would not even want to entertain this theory. Now, to date, one of the biggest flaws with the smiley face murder theory is motive. Every murder has a motive, but in a case like this, the murderers seem motiveless. Why would a group of killers target white college students and kill them in such a particular way? It has been theorized that these were envy killings because the victims were smart and athletic and by many accounts popular. But to know a victim is popular you would really have to live in the area and be familiar with its social structure, which honestly seems unlikely in this case. So that would mean that they would be killing these victims simply because they are athletic and smart, which really doesn't make any sense. The clear lack of motive has forever been something that has hindered this case, but a chilling thought remains. Maybe these killers don't need a motive, and maybe they just want to kill for the sport of it. I mean, who knows what the culture would be like within an organization like this, but you would clearly have to really enjoy murdering people to be a part of it. So maybe they really are just going out there and killing people for fun. Another flaw with this theory has always been the smiley face graffiti itself. Smiley faces are typically one of the most common forms of graffiti, and they are almost always present wherever graffiti is. Also, there was never any rules for how close the smiley face has to be to the spot that the victim was found. Because of this, Gannon could have found a smiley face a good distance away from the crime scene and just claim that it was connected, despite the fact that it really had nothing to do with it. There's just too much gray area here for them to manipulate the facts. The idea of a serial killer tagging its crime scene with a smiley face is one of the reasons that this whole situation and this whole case has become so popular. I mean, it's really creepy and just adds a whole level of intrigue to this case. But ironically, this is also one of the very factors that is holding this all back. Because smiley faces aside, from an outside perspective, it seems very clear that at least some of these deaths truly were murders. It seems whoever has been behind some of these cases may have actually found a way to get away with murder.